Okay, thank you, Anthony. And of course, thank you to all the panelists here for taking time to be with us today. Maybe just to start us off, if all of you would like to do a quick round of introductions, no more than 30 seconds, and then we'll jump straight into the content. So I'll start with you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline. I'm Singapore Country Director for Muse. Muse standing for multiple use. So we're a startup in circularity and in circular economy in order to make reuse a second nature for any of your businesses.
Hi, it's great to be here. My name's Heather Windsor, and I'm a senior sustainability consultant at Unravel Carbon. Unravel Carbon is an enterprise software platform for measuring and reducing carbon emissions.
Hi, I'm Rachel Chen. I am the head of ESG and brand at the Working Capital. We are a co-working and conservation real estate company located in Singapore, mostly in Chinatown, Tanjong Pagar. We manage serviced office spaces, co-working space, and properties throughout Singapore.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm the founder and CEO of an ocean impact organization called 7 Clean Seas. We work with organizations all around the world to help them measure the amount of waste in their supply chains and products. We then, through an innovative plastic credit mechanism, help them offset that, which generates funding at scale, which we deploy into building projects that clean the ocean. And we've recovered over 4,300 tons of plastic from the ocean to date.
Thank you. Okay, so I think from Anthony's quick poll earlier, it seems like all of you and clearly what your companies do is very well embedded within the sustainability space. And we'll find out a bit more about some of the innovative approaches that your company takes to kind of further this agenda a little later. But first, I wanted to address kind of the premise behind why we decided to go with this topic in the first place. So when we're looking at sustainability versus affordability, it kind of is presented in the sense that there are two ends of the spectrum, right? You can either do one or the other. But first, I wanted to ask all of you maybe a rapid fire round, true or false. Do you think this is actually applicable? And maybe starting with you.
So it's definitely applicable. Being sustainable is not against being affordable. I would say that there is not a one answer for everyone. It really depends on your business. But the main step to take is to rethink the way you're doing things. And as far as I know, this is free. This is not on any budget. So just starting that journey is not against your affordability.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, when we look at getting to net zero, of course, that's an undertaking that's incredibly complex and requires massive systems change that is going to cost a lot of money globally. However, I think there is a misconception that this is always the case, and there's actually a lot that we can do today, which is just focus on running your business more efficiently and more profitably, ultimately, which is also more sustainable. So I think it is complex, and like Caroline said, it really depends on your circumstances, but there are steps that companies can take today which will actually benefit you both from a sustainability perspective and a financial perspective.
I think from our business model, initially, we would say that it wouldn't necessarily be affordable from the get-go, but we have found ways through our own values kind of holistically and creatively to make it affordable, and then step by step when we do kind of unlock budget and realign our values and our community's values to prioritize that, it definitely can be affordable, and especially in the long term can help create value for all of our stakeholders.
Yeah, I think action in sustainability is on a spectrum, and it starts at the small actions that are really free for you to implement, and they go all the way through to the extremely ambitious and extremely cost inefficient solutions at the same time. So you've got to choose where is right for you on that spectrum. But instead of talking about cost, we need to flip the script. How can sustainability be used as a value proposition to your company, to your against your competitors or for your customers? Yes, it might come at a cost, but it actually can increase revenues at the same time.
Thank you, and I love how you kind of flip the script there when it comes to revenue instead of looking at just the cost side. And I wanted to kind of build upon what you said, Rachel, about how the working capital kind of started off. There were some costs incurred, of course, when they did all of this, but maybe tell us a little bit more about that journey. What kind of ignited that initial mission to really stay sustainable from the onset? And what was that like in kind of making it more affordable across time?
Sure. I mean, I think for us it came naturally because we're working with heritage and conservation properties, and we really want to honor those and make sure that we're doing right and leaving kind of the neighborhoods that we help build and shape better than we found them. So it wasn't really an option for us to not be good stewards, and that includes like our immediate neighborhood, it includes the environment, the people we affect, so ESG is kind of a natural priority for us. Because we house over 130 companies and 1,100 members every day and welcome them into our neighborhood, all those people and all those companies have completely different cultures, right? They have completely different values. And we are providing a physical space, and we wanted to kind of help people or help drive people's habits and the way that they engage with the space and each other and the environment in a positive way, and ultimately have a positive impact. So it started with small kind of initiatives and programming, and also in ways that we design the space to make sure that we could help people make the right choices. So those are things that really have been kind of free for us. And we have, community roles and front desk roles and custodian roles and interior design roles that help kind of foster that. So having everyone aware of that value of really wanting to be sustainable and choosing the right choice and having a positive impact and being leaders in our space that we manage, it kind of can have a trickle-down effect. And then from there, we really have teamed up with these guys that I share the stage with to have a broader impact. We are a very small team, so I think we have anywhere in a given year from 15 to 20 employees, so we don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do that. So it's really key that we lean on our partners who have, the skill sets and the expertise and can kind of step in and help us build out more programs that can have more impact.
Thanks for that. I love what you said about kind of embedding sustainability within the culture of everyone, right? That everyone involved in the company has that heart within them. It's not kind of just a KPI that they have to hit. And maybe what you said about building with partners as well. So I understand that some of the folks here, actually all of the folks here, are people that the Working Capital works with to further the sustainability mission. So going to you, Caroline, can you help us understand a little bit more about Muse? And specifically, I think we would love to hear more about how you kind of bring sustainability to the consumers and make it easy for them to adopt something like that.
Sure. So for the working capital, what we're doing, we are providing them with reusable food containers and beverage containers. So imagine today, you walk in the biggest fintech festival in the world, you get your food and your drinks here, and they're served in a reusable packaging. Basically, you're not putting the choice in the equation. You're served in something which is reusable. You haven't been paying for that, and you're not thinking about it. What have you been doing today after having your drink or your food? Is tossing it in a bin. That would be the exact same thing, but tossing it in a bin which is gonna be serviced. So serviced, for example, by us, then sanitized, and all this packaging gonna be used again and again and again. So that's basically the platform and the service we are able to provide to any community, to a large community, a full neighborhood, like with the working capital, but it can be also in an event like this one today, or it can be in a private coffee shop, restaurant, in event, in caterings, in corporations. But basically what we do is we do it in order that you're not even thinking about it. All right, so it means that we make it seamless. We don't ask people to think about it and to make an extra effort. All that thinking, rethinking, and redesigning the solution, we've been thinking it for you. We've been deciding and thinking about it and implementing it for you. So basically, we provide the solution in a very easy way in the daily life.
That sounds good. I think that goes back to what Tom said a little bit earlier about how sustainability is kind of a spectrum, and there's different things that you can take from these small actions, which I guess ties in very well with what you do, in that it's a small action for people to kind of use a reusable, especially when it's right in front of them and not even kind of a decision that's offered, and then kind of going on to the bigger, grander projects down the road. So going on to you next, Tom, since we were just speaking about you, could you share a little bit more about the work that 7 Clean Seas does in helping organizations when it comes to things like waste reduction, plastic credits, all of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I started back, 6.5 years ago, we had a very different vision. We wanted to build projects that cleaned the ocean and essentially brought waste management to coastal communities where plastic leakage is the highest. And whilst we wanted to do it, we didn't really know how to pay for it. And we've gone backwards trying to find a value proposition for the commercial world that will allow us to raise capital, en masse, because the funding gap between now and 2040 for fixing waste management in this world is over $1 trillion. There's 2 billion people in this world with no access to waste management. So the issue we're trying to tackle is vast, and what we decided to do is say, okay, well, let's try and commoditize this idea of removing plastic from the ocean. How do we serve that in a form factor that can be, I guess, a benefit to organizations, whether it's like with the working capital who have supported our work, and when you go to the working capital and you take a rental out with them, actually that contributes towards pulling plastic out the ocean through our projects. And together we've been able to remove over 1,100 kilos of plastic from the ocean just through that kind of positive benefit, tying your product or your service, in this case, to environmental action. Going further down, I guess, the ambition level is really where you work with very big organizations. We work with FIFA World Cup 2022 Qatar to develop the world's first methodology for plastic footprint measurement. We audited the games, and then they funded the removal of 400 tons of plastic from the ocean to offset the plastic that was going to be used across all 58 games. And the mechanism behind that is called plastic credits. It's a relatively new financial asset, kind of. So we get to build projects around the world, stop plastic flowing into the ocean. That's a benefit. Generate plastic credits, which are an asset, and we can sell those assets globally to partners like the working capital so that they can really take ownership of that specific environmental action. So it's about bringing scale to these things, because even the conversation around Muse at this event, for example, you getting a coffee and putting it in a Muse container is a small thing, a small impact, but everything at scale is a big impact. And the idea is we need to be thinking about scale and systems change, whether it's reusables or innovative financing mechanisms for waste management or climate change.
Thank you, Tom. All right, going to Unravel Carbon, I guess, last of all. If you could elaborate a little bit, I guess, on what you do with AI and data, since this is ultimately a fintech festival. I think let's bring a bit of that tech element into it, and share a little bit more about the platform that you offer to help organizations really hit that green bottom line.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of Unravel Carbon's main missions is really to make emissions measurement as easy as possible for companies. So I guess similarly to what Tom was saying, we're trying to flip the script. Instead of spending 90% of your time on measuring your emissions and 10% of your time reducing your emissions, we want it to be the other way around. Like, how can we get you to spend 90% of your time reducing your emissions? And how we do that is, of course, there's been a lot of advances in data science and AI, which allow us to process unstructured data a lot more effectively. And we use these technologies in Unravel Carbon to allow you to leverage data you probably already have within your business, such as purchasing data from SAP or Oracle or Xero, business travel data, HR data, and basically use all this to create a full greenhouse gas emissions inventory across scopes 1, 2, and 3. If any of you are familiar with that, that means your company's direct emissions, your emissions from the electricity that you buy to run your business, and also the emissions from your entire supply chain, both suppliers and customers. That is what we do, and we also use this data to try and give companies granular insights into their carbon hotspots that are also actionable. So you can basically start on that path of reducing. We really focus on currently companies with a supply chain in Asia, and we are a proudly Singaporean born and bred company. And I guess maybe one thing to mention in terms of this topic on sustainability and affordability, we do, of course, try and find ways for companies to reduce their emissions, and we have a solutions library with opportunities for companies, and we can recommend things based on what your hotspots are. And it's actually quite surprising to a lot of our customers how many of these things actually reduce your costs as well as your emissions. So we did do this with the working capital, helping them identify the top opportunity areas to reduce their emissions. And of the 9 solutions we recommended for electricity reduction, actually 6 of them saved money over the lifetime of the project. And in some cases, this was up to $350 per ton of carbon reduced, which is pretty significant. So that's why I was saying earlier that I think it can be a bit of a myth sometimes that it always has to cost money. And maybe if sometimes the upfront cost seems a bit scary, there likely will be some efficiencies and savings that you'll realize in the longer term, which will make it worthwhile, even from a financial perspective.
Thank you. So we've heard from all of you now. I guess from Rachel, I think you spoke a little bit about the culture piece and then kind of bringing the right ecosystem partners together to drive the mission. We spoke about the importance of making sure that sustainability in a way is convenient for the consumers, as well as Tom, you talked about waste reduction and plastic credits, and Unravel, of course, when it comes to tracking all of that and then making recommendations. So Rachel, I would love for you to elaborate more about how all of these comes together, because it's a cycle, right? You work with the partners, you work with Muse to bring in the reusables to offer to your tenants, you work with Tom when it comes to the partnership, that when kind of a tenant signs on, some of that membership fees then goes to the 7 Clean Cs, and with Unravel, you kind of get recommendations from them. So tell me a bit more about how all of these come together and how it's been driving the sustainability mission at the Working Capital so far. Has it worked?
I mean, definitely. I think one key thing, like you said, has been, measuring with Unravel, has been identifying other partners that can help us kind of increase our scope and our impact. But what we see is definitely more interest, more engagement from our members. We're attracting companies that have sustainability and ESG, on the top of their values. And that's been great to see companies that are really aligned with that. And part of it has really been talking about our journey, talking about our values from day one, from when we start pitching them to our tours to, eventual onboarding. We kind of educate and talk about it so that they feel proud to have that in their office and in the space that they visit every day. Why that's important for us is because we want to be an example in Singapore, and we want to be kind of like a baseline sustainable choice for people, and we want to make it easy. In running serviced offices and running a co-working space, you're really kind of prioritizing flexibility and kind of turnkey solutions. So if that solution and that space that we give people is sustainable and, pretty affordable in terms of, our market pricing, then it gives people an easy option. And I think if you can give people an affordable, more sustainable option, then they will opt into it, especially in terms of how the global sentiment around sustainability is. Everybody knows that it's important. And right now, while it's not, required to do reporting or there aren't these government regulations in place, I think it is moving in that direction. And one thing that we've been doing also is start to get more certification and embark on that journey. So we've done our Company of Good, which is a Singapore-based certification, and are now in the midst of doing our B Corp certification. And one of the interesting facts that I've learned in that process has been for most B Corp certified organizations, like 80% of them see their revenues increase. So even though it's a lot more governance, it's a lot more effort, it's a lot more, measuring and really working on your policies and SOPs, there is a return on that investment, on that time, on the resource, and making that happen.
Thank you. And I think at this point, I would like to address some of the questions that's been coming in from the audience. So I think one thing that people really want to know, it's the most upvoted one, is how do you then get your customers to pay more to offset the additional cost of sustainability, if any? And maybe I'll start with Heather.
I think I need some time to think about this particular question, but I thought, because Tom, your whole business is really, you're selling a sustainable product. I'd love to hear your perspective maybe first while I digest.
Go for it.
I'll give it a go. Look, there's two different elements to it. First of all, there's regulatory push. I think you just touched on that a little bit then, Rachel. We're seeing more and more around the world regulators looking at waste. Carbon has already been under the microscope for a long time. This is a rapidly accelerating train, and it's going to land on the doorstep of all organizations within the next decade. So getting ahead of it by having a robust sustainability strategy, even if there is an additional cost, is something that might save you money in the long term. And I think that's been covered. In terms of trying to get people to, I guess, partner with 7 Clean Seas, buy plastic credits and integrate that as part of their sustainability offering, well, I think there is so much research coming out almost on a monthly basis from the likes of Nielsen and some of the biggest research institutes in the world that are showing that customers are willing to spend up to 20, I think the more recent one was up to 27% of a, I guess, premium over non-sustainable alternatives. And you've got a retention bonus as well, where they'll actually, I think it's like 3 times more likely to stay with you for a longer period of time. So it's not something you need to see at the moment of cost. It's something you need to step back from and say, look, yes, there is a cost associated to this today, but we believe this gives us a unique position within the market today because, let's face it, beyond in the wider community, people do care about sustainability and they're holding brands and organizations to account. And then say, okay, well, it's cost us X, we've created this impact, let's communicate that and turn that into client retention and an additional value proposition that can allow us to have a higher price than our competitors. So I would say, again, we've got to move away from this mindset of cost and look at opportunity, because there is so much opportunity in this space when it comes to being a better product, being a better service. And all I'd say is everybody just look at your shoes. What make of shoes are you wearing? And why did you choose that make over a cheaper alternative? It's exactly the same. It's about being the brand that is sustainable and therefore being able to literally dictate a higher value from your customers.
Yeah, I think maybe just to build on what Tom was saying about the upfront costs versus the long-term benefits. I think that's something that often isn't really, maybe it's not, there's a lack of awareness or it's not spoken about enough. But there are many other benefits to being sustainable as a company beyond just marketing, let's say, or doing the right thing. You can actually access, for example, better financing opportunities through transparency and around your sustainability performance and improvements in your sustainability performance. So I'm sure some of you are already aware of sustainability-linked loans or other forms of green financing where actually you will be rewarded with a lower interest rate on your loan for, let's say, reducing your emissions or improving other elements of your sustainability performance. So that's just one example of another very tangible benefit you can access. So I think in terms of this question, how it's framed, like how do you get your customers to pay you more to offset the additional costs? Sometimes it's just about education and raising awareness of the benefits that make the cost worthwhile. That's a really important first step because this is an early space, a nascent space. People are still figuring it out, and part of why we're here is to help our customers figure that out.
And turning to you, Caroline, so what Tom and Heather has mentioned is kind of communicating that value proposition, right? Could you share a little bit more about how Muse does that? Because what you are offering is essentially a sustainability solution for consumers, for businesses as well. So how do you communicate that and get them to buy into what you do?
So there are different aspects of it. First of all, there is the direct and short-term impact. For example, in the coming weeks, we're going to be servicing a big event. We're able to tell them, okay, in 10 days, you're cutting your waste by 82 kilos. And this is a direct impact. On the long run, as Tom has been saying, some people might see it as an investment. Why would I pay you a certain amount for this packaging while I'm paying just a few cents for disposable ones? Yeah, sure, on the short term. But once you think on the long term, once you think on the volume, maybe you're paying a little higher amount, but then once you reuse your packaging once, twice, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, then the economical value for you is direct. But on top of that, because we service all of this packaging, today only packaging, tomorrow it could be anything else, but we service all of that with the data. So we are able to tell you on what day, which vendor in the neighborhood has been serving more 12-ounce cup or has been serving more halal soup or whatsoever. Then you're also able to run the data and to know where to place your inventory, to optimize the stock, to optimize the space. And this is maybe not a direct saving for you, but on the long run it is, because then you have the data of your stock, of the utility of it, of how it's used, and you can optimize it on the long run. So people running a business, they see this on the midterm and long-term view. But there is also the fact that you can directly report on your sustainability KPIs, your direct impact in terms of how much CO2 you've been avoiding. And I think that in terms of sustainability reports, and all the major company will have to report on all of that, it's a turnkey solution in order to be able to say how much you've been increasing your positive impact. So you have the short-term investment, you have the long-term view, and you can also calculate the cost of doing nothing and then paying it back in several years.
Thank you. So I think you brought it back a little bit there as well to kind of the importance of data and be able to track everything that you do. And I think that's a really then key part into communicating kind of the value proposition and the opportunities that lie within that sustainability space to your consumers. So I wanted to kind of address something with regards to greenwashing as well. When it comes to kind of communicating sustainability, I think you can't escape that greenwashing conversation. So how do you go draw the line? What kind of goes across that greenwashing boundary, and is it really down back to the data then? Open to all of you.
You looked ready to go. You should go first.
I can go on that one. I'll help you. So for us, it's quite easy. We've been working with Unravel, and we have our figures. We know that once we use 3 times our packaging or 4 times of our bigger packaging, we are, from a sustainability point of view, at break-even. So we have the data. Now, because we did also our homework on getting the data on our own business, because we are challenged a lot on, yeah, okay, but why not ceramic? Why not this packaging rather than this one? And what about the water consumed? But thanks to Unravel, we have all this data. And as soon as you measure, then you can improve. So then I can run my logistic on electrical vehicles. Then I can select a packaging that I'm able to upcycle entirely. And then from Muse, we're not sending anything to incineration and landfill. So this is also like around our full life cycle as a company, not only as the service that we are providing.
I do have one piece of advice when it comes to avoiding greenwashing, and that is just be transparent. I don't think anyone is expecting perfection from the get-go of your sustainability journey. where people get upset is where they feel like they've been deceived. And so by having the data and being able to be transparent on how you've quantified something or how much progress you've made, you're already setting yourself up to have a much more credible and defendable sustainability story.
I couldn't agree more with both of you, and I think we should have gone in the other direction, because I want to go from a more macro perspective, which is, let's just be realistic for a second. The world is awash with greenwashing. There are sustainability professionals in major billion-dollar companies all around the world who are marketeers or from the PR agency department or not specialists in any way, and they've been put into sustainability position because sustainability is now mandated. People are demanding it, customers are demanding it, and it is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. If you approach sustainability from a communication mentality, you're setting yourself up for failure. You may accidentally greenwash. That might get called out. That could be an entire disaster, and that could be, bad for the business. But don't let it put you off. It has to just dictate your strategy. You've got to invest in sustainability experienced staff or training for the staff, and you've got to implement a real strategy which starts with data. Action's great. I'm all about action with 7 Clean Seas, physically pulling plastic out the ocean, but realistically, if you just come to us and you're not taking a data-first approach, we're not going to work with you. You've got to understand your baseline. What's the carbon in your system? What's the waste in your system? And then you've got to convince us that you're going to do something about that. How are you going to take steps to reduce that? And you don't have to eliminate your emissions overnight. That's not the goal here. It's about having a road map of action that you can follow, and that's what you communicate. Communicate progress. Don't pretend that you've already reached the finish line, because at that point you're already in a position where it's very high standards to live up to. So I would just say, from a more macro perspective, be realistic, be transparent. No one will call you out for making a small amount of progress, as long as you can explain why you've made a small amount of progress and that you're on a journey. And in the interim, you're doing other things, whether that's, buying reforestation credits or biodiversity credits or plastic credits as part of a compensation method. But that should only come at the very end of this measurement and reduction loop that you need to keep going through as an organization.
Thank you. Rachel, anything to add?
I think these guys have put it so well, and really this is why we've chosen to work with them, is because we really wanted to prioritize data and things that we could really measure impact by. Because I think as a smaller organization, or as an organization that's, maybe you guys just starting out, or startups, your resources are quite limited. And that also means that maybe the scope of what you could aggressively impact is going to be a little bit, diminished. But if you find the right partners and seek that out, and can make sure that there is the data behind it, that's really key. I think especially with our partnership with Unravel, they have given us a platform that's really processed all of our kind of raw data in a matter of minutes and is able to kind of give us both like a very broad as well as very, very detailed look at all of our numbers and all of our carbon emissions, and helps us pinpoint, when we do have a certain budget, exactly where we want to put that, and how it can have a bigger impact. And going back to the question before about how we can maybe how we could pass that down to customers or get them to pay more for a sustainable product, I think that really has to do with like scale and efficiency. So I think everyone's business, like especially on this stage, everyone will do better as we scale and have a broader impact, but you want to make sure that you're doing that in the right way and you're focusing on the right things. So that's kind of our approach, is data.
All right, so to kind of sum up that then, we're looking first at data, then action, and then the communication naturally follows. And I guess then I want to go back to that point on data right there, right? So the large organizations might have the budget to kind of invest in these data collection and data analysis that maybe Unravel does. But what about for the SMEs out there who may not have that budget or resources to do so? Where can they then start?
I'd say you can still start with data. An Excel sheet's free. And there are very low levels of data collection that you can take to at least start to understand. You know, it's not necessarily about finding opportunities to reduce straight away. It's just, okay, well, what am I doing within this business? What's moving around? Where are my emissions likely to be? And just try and get a good position from a knowledge perspective. And that's your first step. You know, you're already on the journey of sustainability. What I would say, and what a lot of the SME partners that we partner with, many around the world, you know, they choose to, at the same time that they are starting this journey, they're in the very early days of measurement, they're also saying, we still want to make some impact. So whilst we're not going to tie this impact to a sustainability goal of the organization, we're not going to be, offsetting a footprint of carbon or a footprint of plastic, we're still going to invest into these spaces. And it's easy for them to say, look, we're starting to measure our waste, we're starting to measure our carbon, and in the interim, we've paid to reforest 5 acres in the Amazon, and we've paid to remove 10 tons of plastic out the ocean, because we want to create impact today. And we're on this journey where we're going to transition from an impact strategy to more of a sustainability and compensation strategy in the future.
I think maybe just from an emissions perspective, there are bits of information that are already quite easy for companies to track that are linked to your emissions. So like tracking your electricity consumption, for example, which will be available in your invoice, tracking your fuel use. If you have company cars, that's probably already going to be somewhere in your system or with your fuel services provider. And like tracking these are already going to be linked to tracking your emissions, because these things all create emissions. There are also some great free tools out there. So I know the UN Global Compact, which have a Singapore chapter, they have a free carbon emissions measurement tool, which is a great way to get started. I think it is based in Excel. So yeah, whenever in doubt, Excel can save the day.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think I want to take one more audience question since we're down to our last couple of minutes. So Russell has asked, how can organizations identify and prioritize sustainability initiatives that provide the best return on investment? And maybe I'll turn this question first to Carly.
So again, it starts with data. Again, it starts with measuring what can be the impact of the action to take versus the investment. Prioritization, indeed, based on that. I think that in terms of identifying, it's very often a simple innovation. Innovation doesn't mean that it needs to be complex. It just needs you to think differently and to rethink the way you're doing things, because we very often just over-engineer whatever we do, and that's very often where we are creating negative impact or waste in the broader term of it. So yeah, I would say just like stop and rethink the way you do, and then measure in order that you're sure to have your return on investment.
And I think also once you have the data, something that I've seen with my own customers that's been really effective is just share the data with your team. Get them to start thinking about, okay, so let's say one of your top emission sources, it's the materials you buy and it's these specific materials. Just by sharing this with the people who are closest to that particular activity, it starts to spark these conversations and innovation that might help you identify a way that's really easy to reduce your emissions and maybe even save costs, or reposition yourself as a company that's prioritizing sustainability. So I think just starting that collaboration process is really important as well.
Yeah, I would say as well, there's a qualitative approach you can take, as well as, I guess, the data management. Businesses are all different. They have personalities, and your product or your service, if you really look at it, you'll be able to see or understand where are the environmental connections or negative kind of externalities of your service or product. Are they focused around the oceans? Are you a shipping company? Is it Are you an aviation company? And then clearly it's going to be carbon. So there's so many different facets, or I guess pillars beyond carbon to sustainability. And what I would say is a very good way to start choosing which areas to create impact on and take action on is by looking at your business and saying, okay, well, what kind of makes sense? What can I then take action on and communicate to my customers who will see that they're interacting with a business in this industry, and therefore whatever the vertical that I've chosen to take action in makes sense, and it increases that value proposition for them as well.
Thank you. Any final thoughts to add?
I think you guys have summed it up really well. I think understanding kind of the outcome that you want, what's important to your customers, the data that you can gather, and the time frame that you have, the budget that you have, and even really just acknowledging that any step, any small step is really a part of your journey. So even if it doesn't seem significant in the moment, making that a part of your team's habits of like prioritizing that as a kind of North Star to everyone's decision making can make sure that it happens and that people get creative and everyone has that in mind across like every department, which can add up then to larger impact.
Thank you, Rachel. Unfortunately, it does look like we're out of time. So do join me in thanking all my speakers here. And I hope all of you got some actionable takeaways from that. Thank you.